In the depths of the forest of beasts, on a mysterious and eerie night, a baby was abandoned, left to the whims of the wild. Yet, what seemed to be misfortune ultimately transformed into an unforeseen blessing in disguise. This infant found an unexpected fate as it was discovered and taken under the care of 5 masters, each a specialist in their own unique magical techniques. These masters, agreeing to raise the child, bestowed upon him their diverse skills, shaping the boy into an unparalleled individual named Woon Sowol. Despite possessing godlike strength, Woon Sowol was faced with the delicate task of balancing the teachings of his 5 masters. Their techniques, while powerful, threatened to disrupt his inner equilibrium. With determination, Woon Sowol embarked on a journey into the outside world, harboring a desire to ascend to godhood and seek revenge on behalf of his mentors. As an alchemist, his narrative unfolds, beginning on a night shrouded in the forest's mysteries. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale glow that mingled with the air's light fog. A sense of eerie calmness reigned as the night remained undisturbed, until the tranquility shattered under the sound of hurried footsteps and anguished cries. A man emerged, breathless and wounded, dashing through the forest without clear direction. His appearance was rugged and tough, yet his concern was palpable. Cradled in his arms was a crying baby, referred to as "my lord," implying noble heritage. Amidst the chaos, the man implored the infant's silence, well aware that their cries could attract danger. Behind a tree, he sought refuge, stealing glances back towards their pursuers. However, his distress turned to joy as he gazed upon the child, who had managed to find solace, perhaps from days of escape. The man praised the infant's resilience, acknowledging their noble lineage. The baby's smile seemed to recognize the man, eliciting a smile in return. Regrettably, happiness was short-lived. Faced with no alternative, the man apologized to his young charge, torn cloth in hand. With a heavy heart and no options left, he silenced the baby's cries by gagging them with cloth. A somber act completed, he expressed his determination for the child's survival, securing the bundle to a tree. Resolute, he sprinted away, intent on diverting their pursuers. Casting a final glance at the bound infant, he disappeared into the night, leaving behind a legacy of valor. As the story progressed, morning shifted to morning, revealing an elderly figure with a long beard, glasses, and a cane. Accompanied by his parrot, the elderly man wandered the forest, the bird mimicking the baby's cries from the previous night. Unaware of the parrot's source, the man found a bundle hanging from a branch. 2. His astonishment, a crying baby lay within. Curious and concerned for the child's safety, he resolved to take the infant to the ominous-sounding ghost village, prioritizing their well-being. As he journeyed, an eerie fog began to envelope the surroundings. Amidst the mist, a mysterious hand emerged, giving the impression of impending danger. However, the fog unveiled a younger man, distinct with dark brown hair, who greeted the elderly man. The newcomer expressed relief at the man's safety, but received no response in return. Despite this, the elderly man shared his discovery of the abandoned baby, setting the stage for an unfolding tale of mystery and magic. Before the 2 men could ponder further, they acknowledged that even though the baby was so young, it undoubtedly held a tale that led to its presence in the forest. Clouds began to weave into a peculiar tunnel, revealing a silhouette of a village at its end. The conversation between the men was abruptly cut short, as the elder of the 2 urged his companion to ready the other masters for the arrival of their unexpected guests. Back in the village, their companions bore expressions of uncertainty upon seeing the baby. Curiosity and timidity painted their faces as they questioned the child's origin and the old master's return with the child in tow. The elder master seemed perturbed by this implication that the child was related to him. Once the confusion was resolved, the inquiring master sheepishly retracted his statement and broached the idea of collectively raising the child. The eldest of the masters reiterated that they were collectively responsible for the child's upbringing due to his own advanced age. The weight of the task was too much for him alone. Amidst this discussion, A master who had distanced himself from the baby spoke up. This blonde-haired individual appeared to be the youngest among them and was missing both of his arms. He asserted that he had no connection to the child and, as such, held no obligation to care for it. Another master from the group took exception to this attitude, confronting the blonde-haired individual for his apparent callousness. This clash prompted the old master to address the stressed master by name, Janjin. He reminded the group that their naden, a technique granting alchemists a form of immortality and halted aging, was damaged. However, what struck Janjin was the old master mentioning his name. It was revealed that the masters had sworn an oath not to divulge their identities to one another. The situation must have been awkward, living with housemates whose names remained unknown. With identities unveiled, Janjin attempted to assert his fame, claiming mastery over a medicinal technique. The old master punctured this facade by introducing himself as Aklu, the former holder of the title, Judge of Life and Death. Aklu was renowned not only for his position but also his medical prowess. His reputation was enough for his companions to recognize him instantly. Senior Aklu apologized for the secrecy and urged the group to reveal their own identities, as they likely had already formed speculations. The elder master's reputation was so towering that the others felt compelled to introduce themselves. They began with young Sohun, senior of his forest companion, a master of techniques. Janjin's name had already been disclosed, and he formally revealed himself as Chamyan Yodo, a renowned thief. The final master, Pangogu, opted to skip titles and techniques, a testament to his confidence. Janjin pointed out that Pang was likely the renowned skillful blacksmith known as the Golden Hands. However, not everyone joined the conversation. All eyes turned to the young blonde man, who had maintained silence since distancing himself from the child. Despite his silence, the group refrained from prying further into his identity. Shifting the topic, Cedric asked if the group had guessed why he revealed his identity. Master Hyang accurately assumed that the elder master sought them to take the child as their disciple. With their nadens damaged, their only hope of passing down their techniques rested on imparting their knowledge to the child. Furthermore, leaving the child to fend for itself was deemed untenable. The child, like all beings, deserved a chance to survive, even if their fates were predetermined. The child's physical capabilities weren't a concern for Janjin. He questioned the elder master about whether a child could learn all the techniques they needed to pass down. Senior Aklu affirmed his belief that it was indeed possible. With this reassurance, Cedric broached the topic once again, inquiring if they were all in agreement about raising the baby together. With no objections, the group's confidence in bearing this responsibility grew. The elder master unveiled a magical ring that had come with the boy, inviting the other masters to inspect it. Speculations arose that the ring might change upon the application of spiritual energy. Its material was identified as meteorite, indicating its high-grade nature. Master Hyung deciphered an inscription inside the ring. Altar of the Holy Fire, the start of pure soil. He interpreted it as signifying a conflict between old and new powers, suggesting that a pure world could emerge if the altar fell. Despite potential conflicts, the masters collectively agreed that the child was innocent, detached from such matters. With the child now a part of their makeshift family, Senior Akla decided it was time to give the child a name. Janjin suggested that since Senior Akla was the oldest, he should have the honor. The elder master then shared a poignant memory of losing his own son to illness despite his mastery of medicine. In honor of his son and the meteorite ring that arrived with the child, he named the baby Woon Sowol, a name met with the approval of the other masters. Senior Akla outlined the division of their teachings. He would impart his medicinal techniques and craftsmanship of the River of First Skill, a potent ability acquired from the Orb of the Blood Fortress. Master Hyung would teach about magical beasts, as well as spells involving the void of space, shadow concealment, and imaginary formations. Master Pang, a man of few words, would instruct in creating mystical tools. Janjin, a bit flustered, confessed he had no grand techniques to teach, offering skills like flash steps, dirt escape, and self-shrinking, all valuable for a thief. Senior OGG dismissed his doubts, emphasizing the significance of mastering these thief skills. The masters gathered around the now sleeping Woon Sowol, who had gained 4 mentors unknowingly. Noting the blonde-haired master's lack of enthusiasm, Janjin brought the sleeping child to him, hoping to convince him. The young master's demeanor softened as he cuddled the child close, perhaps finding a connection with someone who shared his handicap. It turned out the young man wasn't as cold-hearted as he seemed. Time moved forward, and 10 years had passed since the master's fateful encounter with Sowol. However, the peaceful village was disrupted by a commotion from a house. Senior Akla was visibly frustrated with the 10-year-old Sowol's struggle with memorization. He walked out of the room in exasperation, leaving Sowol to sigh. Unexpectedly, Janjin entered the room at precisely the right moment. Seeing his 4th master brought a wide smile to the child's face. The previous scolding by Senior Akla had left Sowol on the porch, nursing his feelings. Janjin's presence brought solace. The 4th master accurately deduced that Sowol had been scolded for not memorizing herb names. Sowol confirmed this, feeling as though he might be unintelligent. Janjin swiftly dismissed these self-critical thoughts, assuring him that he was a diligent learner. He explained that Senior Akla's hurried behavior was due to his age and concern that he might not have much time left to teach. Janjin encouraged Sowol not to harbor resentment towards the first master, and certainly not to blame himself. Contrary to his assumption, Janjin revealed that Sowol's concern was for Senior Akla's well-being. Sowol inquired about the first master's lifespan, and Janjin disclosed that Senior Akla had lived for 800 years before his maiden was broken. His time was approaching due to his old age. Janjin's message wasn't entirely bleak. He reminded Sowol to focus on his studies, alleviating Senior Akla's worries. Sowol agreed, and Janjin praised his kindness. Janjin then asked Sowol about the most important thing his masters had taught him. When Sowol reached for something, he was relieved that Sowol had memorized it. Sowol recited the lessons: always be kind, believe in oneself, and exercise caution in trusting others. As a reward, Janjin handed him 3 nectarines, much to Sowol's delight. Sowol inquired if Janjin got the nectarines from outside the village, given that they were found in the forest. Janjin casually confirmed, adding that they even took a goat along. Master thief skills at play. The excitement prompted Sowol to ask if he could go outside. However, Janjin immediately denied his request, reminding Sowol of the conditions set by the first master. To venture into the forest, Sowol must first open the gates of heaven, achieving immortality and balance as an alchemist. This reassured Sowol, knowing he would accomplish this as he had already mastered the craftsmanship of the river of first skill. Seeing Sowol's renewed spirits, Janjin prepared to leave, but not without promising more nectarines if Sowol continued studying. Janjin exuded a cool, uncle-like aura. As day transitioned to night, Sowol found himself in his room, studying by the light of a solitary candle. Drowsiness crept over him, causing his eyelids to droop. Suddenly, he was jolted by a loud bleating sound from outside. Peering out the window, he saw the blonde-haired master feeding a goat. Despite his lack of hands, the young master managed using his feet to grasp and feed the animal. It appeared that Janjin wasn't fibbing about the goat. Sowol offered to help, but the young master asserted that his handicap didn't hinder him. Still, he accepted Sowol's assistance, suggesting that if Sowol wanted to help, he could pet the goat. Sowol gladly complied, marveling at the animal. He mused that there must be other wonderful things outside the village. This led him to question the forest's dangers and the outside world. The young master candidly replied that someone as delicate as Sowol, a child, wouldn't survive for a minute out there. This sobering truth indicated the gravity of their teachings, to prepare Sowol for survival beyond the village. Sowol, hurt by the words, sulked in a corner with the goat watching. The young master, sensing Sowol's hurt, invited him to sit beside him. Unintentionally taking on a teaching role, the master astutely recognized Sowol's talents and his struggle with memorization. To assist in his studies, the master taught Sowol a phrase, instructing him to repeat it rigorously to engrave it in his memory. Speaking in an unfamiliar language, the master's intention was clear. Sowol understood, and even if he didn't, the master promised to repeat it until Sowol had learned it by heart. They shared a moment by the fire, and afterward, the young master suggested keeping this secret between them. Time continued its passage. 5 years had elapsed since we last saw Sowol. Now at 15 years old, he listed the ingredients for an herbal pill from memory. The narrative's penchant for time skips persisted. During this period, the first master had become bedridden, but he continued to monitor Sowol's progress in medicinal techniques. When Sowol demonstrated his mastery of medicinal ingredients, Senior Aklu expressed satisfaction, proclaiming that he had nothing more to teach. Unfortunately, this marked the last lesson the first master would be able to give. After expressing his gratitude, he confessed that his time was running out. The other masters and Sowol gathered by his bedside, aware of the impending farewell. Senior Aklu requested their attention, announcing he had something crucial to convey. He revealed a surprising piece of information. There was a way to leave the forest. This revelation shocked the masters, including Master Hyung, who had never heard of such a method before. The first master recounted a tale from his days as a third-generation alchemist at the Blood Fortress. He had encountered an injured man named Lee Dongjin, who claimed to have escaped the forest of beasts. The escape involved a spirit stone owned by Lee Dongjin, who resided in a cave alongside the flood dragon. Despite the injured man's claim of slaying the beasts, the cave's location remained elusive. While the prospects seemed uncertain, Sowol now had a potential means of escape. He wasn't destined to die in the forest. The first master advised Sowol that his chances of survival would increase if he managed to flee. Calling Sowol closer, the first master instructed him that, above all, he must escape and hoped Sowol would honor his teachings by repaying their efforts kindly. However, Senior Akla wasn't finished with surprises. When Sowol affirmed he would fulfill his duties, even if it meant facing death, the master revealed a bombshell. The river of first skills craftsmanship that Sowol had learned was incomplete and dangerous. This revelation incited Janjin's anger, prompting him to question the first master's motives. The first master explained that while the skill was powerful, its control diminished with consistent use. If Sowol were to lose control, he risked losing everything he had worked for, coupled with unbearable pain. Senior Akla confessed that when the master of the Blood Fortress came to him for treatment due to the skill's side effects, he stole it out of greed. This treachery led the once famed healer to his banishment. Following the first master's death, the elder master had lived with regret over his banishment and leaving his family behind. He entrusted Sowol with several requests: to visit the Blood Fortress to learn the skill properly, to inform his wife and daughters of his fate, and to visit the cave of Lee Dongjin. Sowol, showing his unwavering determination, agreed to fulfill his master's dying wishes. Alone with his thoughts, Senior Aklu expressed gratitude for his student and regret for not being able to witness his growth. He closed his eyes and passed away peacefully. His companions laid his body on a bed of flowers atop a pyre, which was later set ablaze. Sowol and the other masters watched as his body turned to ashes, scattered in the wind. Time continued its march, and despite the first master's departure, Sowol's life remained steady. He diligently received lessons from the other masters. The second master taught him military tactics, while the third master instructed him in controlling fire through magical means, even with limited materials. Both masters emphasized the importance of understanding magical beasts, their dangers and their potential for forging mystical tools. Janjin taught Sowol flash and hover steps, as well as concealment techniques for stealth. This routine persisted for 3 years, and now at 18 years old, Sowol was transitioning into adulthood. One afternoon, Sowol and Janjin spent time together. As they playfully plucked white hairs from Janjin's head, Sowol expressed gratitude for his masters. However, Janjin sensed something was amiss and encouraged Sowol to be forthright. With Janjin's support, Sowol confessed his struggle with opening the heavenly gates. Although he sensed their presence within, he couldn't open them despite exerting ample spiritual energy. Janjin reassured him that feeling the gates at such a young age was an achievement. He assured Sowol that since he had mastered the river of first skills craftsmanship early on, breaking through the gates was only a matter of time. Janjin scolded Sowol for his impatience, emphasizing that his situation was fortunate compared to other alchemists who often couldn't even sense the gates, let alone open them. Janjin then inquired if Sowol had mastered hiding his presence from magical beasts, and reminded him of the abundance of herbs in the forest to aid his training. Sowol confirmed this, and Janjin gave him permission to gather supplies outside the village. With Sowol's safety ensured, Janjin smiled and reminded him not to fight any beasts and to return before sunset. As the afternoon progressed, Sowol ventured into the forest outside the ghost village. He swiftly found herbs like gyrian and wiggle herbs, as well as a flower called the yellow dugan. With a successful foraging experience, Sowol almost lost track of time as the sun descended. Realizing the sun was setting dangerously low, he sprinted back to the village, his feet barely touching the ground as he moved with remarkable speed. Right now, we can see one of Janjin's techniques in action. The reason behind Sowol's quick movements was the hover step skill, which allowed him to cover vast distances with his speed but with little energy. Sowol, thrilled about being able to let loose, thanked the masters for letting him go out. However, with the intention of not returning empty-handed, he skidded to a stop. Drawing inspiration from Janjin bringing back a goat previously, he decided to catch one for himself. He aimed to replicate that feat, demonstrating his quick thinking and agile movements. Swift on his feet, Sowol's agility enabled him to transition from the forest floor to the treetops. Using a tree branch as a vantage point, he observed the forest, sensing the presence of an animal nearby. Just as he turned his head, a goat appeared in a clearing to his right. With the same quickness he displayed in climbing the tree, Sowol dropped down quietly, preparing to capture the goat. However, his focus was interrupted when he sensed the presence of another, more malicious beast nearby. Choosing caution over recklessness, Sowol hid behind a tree, deciding to return for the goat later. As he considered heading home, the sun had already set, making him realize he was running late. Disappointed about breaking promises, he decided it was time to leave. In this moment, a large three-headed wolf, identified as a low-level magical beast called the Three-Crying Wolf, appeared dangerously close to his hiding spot. Sowol recognized that fighting the wolf directly was unwise and chose evasion as his best strategy. Utilizing his flash step technique, he evaded the wolf's attacks with ease. Thanks to Janjin's teachings, he was able to dodge effectively. However, he knew that evasion alone wouldn't suffice. Thinking quickly, he decided to use the offensive spell he had been taught by the first master. Gathering rocks from the forest floor and chanting a foreign incantation, Sowol wrapped the stones in an aura and hurled them at the wolf. The energy blasts were swift and powerful, penetrating each of the wolf's heads cleanly. With the fight over, Sowol still faced the consequence of returning home late. The masters, especially Janjin, were displeased with how he had spent his afternoon, breaking promises and returning after sunset. Sowol's apologies were met with scolding, and Janjin's frustration was evident. However, the second master took a different approach, calmly questioning Sowol about his experiences. Satisfied with Sowol's honest answers, the second master softened and proposed forging mystical tools from the magical beast's carcass. Sowol was given an opportunity to prove himself by mastering the shadow concealment spell and the magic flags made by Master Pang. As the time for Sowol's trial approached, he returned to his regular lessons, this time under the guidance of the third master Pang. Diligently practicing, he worked on cultivating a magical fire from his mouth, akin to a scene from Forged in Fire. The objective was to form a blade using the conjured fire. Sowol's master emphasized the proper control of chi to shape a dagger, acknowledging Sowol's exceptional dedication to learning. The dagger formed from his magical fire in no time. Pang instructed him to use this dagger to take down low-level magical beasts for experience. To finish forging the blade, Master Pang dictated that he use the wind of determination to cool it down, and in no time, the dagger was ready for use. The wind of determination is a forging technique that allows a user to blow cold winds from one's mouth to cool down hot metal. Curious about the quality of his dagger, Sowol asked if it could be considered a Dharma tool, as mystical tools are classified according to the magic they contain. Unfortunately, according to the third master, such a tool is nowhere near the level of even the lowest of artifacts. To make one at his current skill level, it would take him about 3 years. Still, Sowol was successful in making a weapon, and with that, Master Pang dismissed his student. As the master prepared to make the trial flags, he urged Sowol to rest. However, the boy continued to practice herbal medicines in his spare time. A few days later, Sowol successfully made his first medicinal pill even without the guidance of the first master. He persisted in his study of medicinal techniques, and after 5 tries he created the Pill of 9 Beliefs, seeking to cleanse his body of toxins. He took the pill and began to meditate, but his meditation was abruptly interrupted as Janjan entered his room to tease him about making food. Sowol passively dismissed his playful master. However, it turned out Janjan had a reason for visiting beyond annoying his student. He had apparently convinced the other masters to let Sowol go outside with his current skills, though in reality, Janjan had lied to the other masters to facilitate Sowol's trial. Now Sowol's trial had arrived. His test was to use the magical flags Pang had created and cast the shadow concealment spell well enough to hide his presence. Unsurprisingly, Sowol managed the spell with ease. Yun Hyung couldn't help but commend his student for his excellence with the new spell and the magical daggers he had created earlier. Sowol was now ready to explore the forest of the beasts, and for 3 months he did just that. He became so accustomed to the forest that the beasts around the village learned to hide when they felt his presence. However, this time, Sowol's interests weren't solely on the beasts. Master Pang had instructed him to gather spirit stones so he could forge mystical tools. Sowol knew that these stones were found in places with high spiritual energy. With his hover step, he dashed towards the mountain area of the forest, quickly reaching the base of the mountain. The desolate landscape didn't deter him, as he was confident he'd find herbs along the mountain. Sure enough, Sowol's hunch was correct. Along the mountainside, as he started climbing, he encountered several important herbs for pill-making, such as the flower heartbreak. Yet, what caught his attention the most was a glowing flower up ahead on his path. The flower emitted a faint purple light, and Sowol couldn't believe his luck as he had stumbled upon a rare herb known as the flower of light. Unfortunately, excitement turned to caution as he remembered that where there are magical herbs, magical beasts are often present. Without hesitation, a low-class magical eagle-like beast appeared, angered by the presence of the intruder it had spotted. Sowol was able to identify the giant bird, calling it a sutra beast. The next thought that crossed his mind was to go on the offensive. He grabbed stones from the mountainside and shot them towards the beast using energy blasts. However, this effort proved futile, as even the spell that had taken down the 3-headed wolf couldn't bring down the bird. What puzzled Sowol even more was that the bird, despite being hit and at a disadvantage, still didn't attack him. It occurred to him that the bird might be more concerned for the rare herb than attacking. So, Sowol devised a clever plan. He reached up to uproot the flower of light, much to the bird's annoyance, and tied it to a rock. He shot the flower downwards with his energy bursts, and the angry sutra beast followed suit. With no more distractions, Sowol swiftly maneuvered himself to the top of the cliff, which now served as a pseudo-platform. The boy laid down the flags in a circle and cast his shadow concealment spell, and it was just in time too. No sooner had his body turned completely invisible, the sutra beast appeared out of nowhere, hovering in the air and searching for the human who had thrown its precious herb. Sowol slowly backed away, but as one problem was solved, a new one arose from a distant cave. He noticed another beast approaching, the jade ravine boar, a boar with green skin and covered in flames. Sensing the presence of yet another beast, this one intermediate in strength, the boar resembled a pig from Angry Birds, doused in flames. The two monsters locked eyes, and both prepared for a battle, leaving Sowol caught in the midst of a clash between magical beasts. As if in a WWE smackdown of magical beasts, both creatures charged their attacks. The boar had a fiery ball ready, while the giant bird accumulated lightning energy for a strike. The energy released from their clash resulted in a blinding light, akin to a showdown between a Kamehameha and a Gallic gun. Sowol could only cover his eyes, amazed that the battle between a low-level and an intermediate magical beast exerted greater power than his own. After the dust settled, the fight continued. The Sutra beast used the dust as a smoke screen to go on the offensive. Coated in an aura, it dashed toward the boar, which responded by intensifying the flames on its back. Sowol was still within the circle of flags and couldn't do anything but watch. By the time he looked up, the Sutra beast was close to hitting the boar. The impact was massive, causing a ball of energy to wrap around the beasts upon collision. This created a huge crater, shaking the entire mountain. Sowol, caught in the blast, was thrown into the air, realizing he needed to be more attentive next time. Fortunately, he had the Flower of Light, which allowed him to survive the impact of being thrown high into the air. As the battlefield fell silent, Sowol decided to explore the crater to see the aftermath of the battle. He cautiously crept up and slid down the side of the hole, only to find both beasts lying dead. A battle between low-level and intermediate beasts had left a significant crater in the ground. Taking advantage of the spoils of war, Sowol decided to search the carcasses for valuable materials. First, he searched the boar's body and found a spirit stone, a small stone producing a large fire around it, fitting for the nature of the ravine boar. He also plucked feathers from the Sutra beast's body, anticipating crafting a Dharma tool with them. Even more surprisingly, Sowol acquired the Flower of Light he had initially found, apparently saved by the bird's talons during the fall. In essence, he had been camping on the battlefield. Now equipped with his acquisitions, Sowol headed back to the ghost village with his backpack full. Back in the village, Sowol's exploits of hunting an intermediate beast did not go unnoticed. With all his materials gathered, he and Master Pang immediately began crafting a Dharma tool called the Pouch of Abundance. This tool enabled the user to store vast amounts of material, regardless of shape or size, within it. Despite its small appearance, the pouch held remarkable capabilities. With these accomplishments and his recent successes in exploring the forest, Sowol's life settled into a routine. Mornings were spent gathering supplies in the forest, and evenings were dedicated to crafting Dharma tools and pills to aid him in opening the heavenly gates. After 3 months, Sowol was finally prepared to attempt opening the heavenly gates and achieving heavenly rebirth. Skipping ahead to do so, he first had to take the cultivated pill and then meditate to spiritually open the gates. The masters had emphasized the precision required in making the pill and the risk of poisoning if a mistake occurred. However, they also expressed their faith in Sowol's abilities and assured him they'd be there by his side if anything went wrong. Encouraged by their support, Sowol proceeded with confidence. He swallowed the pill and closed his eyes to meditate. Almost immediately after consuming the pill, he felt his body experiencing simultaneous sensations of hot and cold energy. Master Hyung noticed this and cautioned Sowol to endure the pain. If he were to even open his mouth, half the accumulated energy would dissipate. Sowol persevered and eventually reached a point of balance within his body. The once separate energies now unified within him, forming his spiritual self. Covered in a colorful yet dark aura, he saw his goal in front of him, the heavenly gates. With his overwhelming spiritual energy, Sowol approached the gate and pushed the door open with his hands. Stepping through, he found himself surrounded by light. When he regained consciousness, Sowol saw the smiling faces of his masters. They joyfully informed him that he had succeeded. Janjan, particularly cheerful, jokingly expressed his jealousy. Master Hyung congratulated Sowol for his achievement and praised him for taking the first step toward becoming a true alchemist. The masters explained that he had completed the initial, dam development, ritual and now needed to undergo heavenly birth, where his form would take on that of the sky. He would then progress to achieving the stage of the law of spiritual energy, enabling him to freely use spiritual energy to form barriers. The subsequent powers to be acquired were the breath of the sun, granting fire manipulation, and the vitality of yin and yang, drawing from three treasures representing the origins of all things. Once these stages were achieved, an alchemist would enter the stage known as the Heaven's Throne, essentially becoming a god. The masters wished for Sowol to strive for this final stage, and he expressed his determination to reach that goal. The only anomaly was when Sowol asked how much time had passed since he fell asleep, and Master Pang answered, 1 month. A rather unique way to rest. After taking another month's rest, Sowol was now confident in his new abilities. He could jump off the air and even fly, experiencing a significant upgrade. He climbed the peak of a mountain, watching the sunset behind the mountaintops over the horizon. It seemed Sowol had developed a fondness for scaling tall peaks, and who wouldn't, given the ability to fly and climb effortlessly? During this particular day, Sowol admired the scenery from the mountaintop, still getting used to the powers that came with opening the heavenly gates. Looking to the neighboring mountains, he recognized the cliff where the boar and the sutra beast had fought. Observing from a different angle, he noticed something else on the mountainside. Sowol leapt into the air to reach the neighboring mountaintop, hoping to find spirit stones or herbs. Hovering over the object of interest, he discovered an empty nest, perhaps from a deceased sutra beast. The lesson of underestimating a magical beast was still fresh in his mind, prompting Sowol to approach with caution. He drew his newly crafted mystical tools, a sword and a shield, and treated his sword while also entrusting his shield. Musing that this situation might be the perfect test for his weapons, Sowol settled himself softly in the middle of the nest. He observed that the floor was littered with sutra feathers, but there was no sign of anything alive. That's when he heard a rustling sound from the dried straws of the nest behind him. Acting on instinct, Sowol deployed his entreated shield, bracing for impact as the shield expanded into an almost spherical wall, seemingly materializing out of thin air. However, no attack came. Peering out from behind the shield, he hoped to spot the source of the sound. There, just a bit ahead of him, lay a tiny pig on the floor. Adorable as it was, this wasn't an ordinary pig, it had red markings on its body. Sowol assumed it was the offspring of the Jade Ravine boar he had encountered earlier. Approaching the harmless baby boar, Sowol even fed it by hand. He theorized that the boar must have attacked the sutra beast because it had taken its child. Deciding to take the baby boar back to the village, Sowol sensed the potential usefulness of taming such a creature. The masters welcomed the addition warmly, and Sowol explained that he had found the baby boar all alone in the sutra's nest. He expressed his desire to raise the beast himself. Master Hyung approved, stating that such beasts could be tamed, especially when they've lost their parents. Janjan, being his exuberant self, continued to boast on Master Hyung's behalf. It turned out that the second master was renowned throughout the land as an expert beast tamer. If Sowol wanted to tame the boar, Janjan suggested he listen attentively to Master Hyung's guidance. The praises caused Master Hyung to blush, showing his humility. Nevertheless, Master Pang explained that it would take at least 5 years for the boar to produce enough fire for forging. Once again, Sowol was left to wait for the fruits of his labor. Fortunately, with the potential to live up to 400 years, he had plenty of time. Fast forward 5 years since Sowol acquired the baby boar, he found himself disheartened by the lack of progress in his training. Just as before, Janjin appeared seemingly out of nowhere to console his student. Janjin jokingly accused Sowol of being greedy but then provided him with tips to further his progress. He thought that Sowol needed a new environment to practice in. Janjin asked if Sowol had learned about the Eternal Youth Dan pill from the first master. Sowol replied affirmatively but mentioned that he had already learned Janjin's shape alteration technique, making the pill seem redundant. Although both techniques involve changing one's appearance, Janjin explained that the Eternal Youth Dan was far harder to detect than the other. So, Sowol began to gather supplies to make the pill. The required herbs could only be found near a waterfall. With this task in mind, Sowol went to a waterfall to forage for the necessary ingredients. As he considered how rare the ingredients for this pill were to find, Sowol reflected on his constant practice and training day by day. Deciding to take a bit of relaxation, he rolled up his pants and feet and waded into the small lake formed at the base of the waterfall. He took his time, savoring the moment. But as he turned to leave, he suddenly sensed the presence of something approaching. Sowol immediately deployed his shadow concealment spell from behind cover and waited to observe. His hunch was right, and soon enough, two figures became visible. What he didn't expect was that the figures were women. Sowol had to find the inner voice of his fourth master to resist temptation, as the women undressed to go swimming. He mentally reminded himself to focus on his goal and the teachings he had received. He also remembered not to trust anyone, especially those who appeared to be women alchemists. To confirm his suspicions, he examined their clothes and noticed that each of them had their own pouch of abundance, indicating that they were alchemists who had at least opened the heavenly gates. As Sowol considered the idea of taking the pouches from the women, a mysterious man suddenly appeared out of nowhere and beat him to it. This mystery man grabbed the pouches, but as soon as he did, black smoke emitted from the packs and went straight to his face. The man started coughing out the powder, and as the two women approached, Sowol was relieved he hadn't acted rashly and had remembered not to trust too quickly. The two ladies mocked the man, calling him Joe Jagging, and berated him for his desperate behavior. The black smoke was revealed to be black acid powder designed to suppress his ability to use spiritual energy. The man, Jagging, had a history with the women. He had tried to marry one of the sisters, but when his advances were rejected, he kidnapped the other sister named Buyong. This toxic behavior led the sisters to devise a plan. Knowing he might try to steal their pouches, they sabotaged them with the poison. With Jagging incapacitated, the ladies decided to return to their bath. So, upon learning the whole story, chose not to interfere, thinking that the man deserved his fate. As Sowol turned to leave, he noticed Jagging pulling out silver needles from inside his cloak. Sowol called out in warning, and because of his alert, the women were able to defend themselves from the sneak attack. Infuriated by the interruption, Jagging angrily demanded to know who had intervened. The women realized Jagging was moving freely despite being poisoned. It turned out Jagging had anticipated their countermeasure and developed a spell to neutralize the poison. Jagging brandished his Dharma tool and boasted about his advantage against the women's level. Although Sowol had seen through the trap, Jagging was concerned about the invisible intruder. Sowol wisely refrained from revealing himself, waiting for the right moment to do so. With limited options, the women thanked Sowol for his intervention and proposed a deal. They would team up to take down Jagging. Jagging countered, offering a share of the spoils to whoever had interfered. Sowol carefully considered his position. He decided to help the women, recognizing that even with a skill gap, their combined strength at the fourth stage of heavenly birth could challenge Jagging. Knowing that he had gone unnoticed, Sowol chose to reveal himself from his concealment circle. The surprise was evident on the faces of the group. Even expert alchemists could not detect someone so close. Jagging questioned Sowol about his level, and the boy lied, claiming to still be in the process of forming a Niden and not yet out of the Dan development stage. He did, however, disclose that he possessed many useful Dharma tools. Jagging, ever greedy, planned to deal with the women first and then take out Soul for his magical weapons. Jagging asked for Soul's help, and playing dumb, Soul agreed. The women, though, were not enthusiastic about gaining another enemy. One of them, who seemed wary of men, moved to strike the first blow. She molded her sword, and a flash of green lightning emerged. Soul quickly deployed his entreated shield, protecting both himself and Jagging. Soul assumed that Jagging didn't block intentionally, but rather to gauge his strength. Now that Jagging had seen his shield, he planned a counter using his own Dharma tool. Jagging gathered dark energy and struck the female alchemist who had attacked. While she was pushed back, she remained unharmed. Jagging mockingly questioned the skills of his would-be assassins. Before letting out another surge of dark energy, this time the women were ready for it. The one with the sword used her saber barrier skill, creating a dome of slashes that shielded them from the attack. The other female alchemist, who wielded a fan, took the opportunity to strike since Jagging was still focused on Soul. She released a gust of red beams that shot directly at Jagging with incredible speed. Soul didn't let the attack hit, however, as he needed to maintain his cover and defend Jagging at all costs. The strike angered the evil alchemist, prompting him to take the fight more seriously. Jagging urged Soul to disregard blocking and strike back. With no other choice, Soul launched a slash from his sword along with Jagging's dark energy attacks. The woman with the sword anticipated the attack and shielded herself and her sister from the attacks. Finally, the names of the two women were revealed. Jagging, anticipating the appearance of the barrier, launched another Dharma tool-based attack, using the compressed jade staff. He threw multiple small crystal-like balls at the barrier. Soul realized that Jagging must specialize in breaking down barriers. With the opportunity to strike, Soul swung his blade at Jagging. The senior alchemist dodged the attack, and with his cover blown, Soul had to go on the offensive. Soul conjured silver needles and shot them towards Jagging. When Jagging raised his arms to block, Soul used his Squalor of Anxiety technique to blow a wall of flame towards him. With Jagging incapacitated by the flames, Soul went for the finishing attack, his energy bursts. The beams of energy hit Jagging directly, causing him to collapse. Soul confidently approached the downed alchemist, and proclaimed his greed to be his downfall before swinging his blade down on him. With the evil alchemist dispatched, the two sisters formally expressed their gratitude to Soul. They asked for forgiveness, especially Buyong, saying it was wrong to berate him earlier about men being the same. Soul had put up a facade to hide his intentions from Jagging, so he apologized as well. Nonetheless, Buyong still called Soul a hero. The sisters formally introduced themselves. The elder was Yag Buyong, and the one who wielded the fan was Woon Sowol. Upon their request, Soul also introduced his full name. With Jagging taken care of, Soul split the contents of his pouch of abundance with them. This included special Dharma tools such as the marble Dharma tool and the jade staff used against them earlier, as well as the mirror Dharma tool and the Zen mirror, along with some herbs. Since Soul had been searching for herbs, the sisters were more than happy to provide him with many of the ingredients he needed. The only item they lacked was the serene bamboo, which was rarer than most. Soul didn't mind, as he intended to acquire it himself. Recognizing Soul's quest for rare items, Buyong asked what he planned to do with them. Despite thinking the sisters wouldn't recognize Eternal Youth Dan pills, Soul explained their purpose: to keep the user's appearance young. The sisters admitted they knew of the pill, though they weren't skilled enough to make even a regular Dan pill, let alone an advanced one. Leon teasingly said she's jealous, and more so her sister, who wants to maintain a youthful appearance. If one wasn't blushing from that, she definitely did after Soul called her pretty. Oh, so you're a big charmer, but back to business. Boyan then proposed another deal. It just so happened that the sisters know where to find the serene bamboo. As he headed home, Sowol thought about the deal. The sisters would lead him to the area and help him take down the monster guarding it, and in return, he'll give them some eternal youth Dan pills. The opponent this time wasn't some simple thing, as the beast guarding the serene bamboo was a great conch spider. What's more, it's classified as an advanced level beast, more powerful than the ones he had faced before. Nonetheless, the boy had accepted the deal, and so he sought the advice of the one master who's an expert in magical beasts, Master Hyan. Sowol said that he had found the spot for the serene bamboo, but he didn't mention anything about meeting other people outside of him. Curious, the second master said that it is to be expected since magical herbs tend to be guarded by magical beasts. In fact, Sowol is extremely lucky that it's only an advanced level magical beast. Apparently, it isn't uncommon to have beasts of a higher level than that guarding the rare herbs. Whatever the case, the master would still do anything to help his students progress. The second master warned Sowol that the spider's webs will be the most annoying thing about it, so he'll make a potion that'll make their weapons cut right through the threads. Sowol thanked his master and left, but he still hadn't mentioned the events that happened earlier. He actually wanted to talk about it, and so he turned to Janjin, his emotional support master, to the rescue. The two huddled around a campfire, and Sowol proceeded to tell his fourth master about his encounter with other alchemists. The young man mentioned something about one of the alchemists he met who had died. Janjin then asked Sowol if he was the one who killed him. Sowol answered yes, affirming that the person was evil, leaving him no choice. However, sadness could be seen in his eyes, sensing that the boy still had some kind of guilt. Janjin supported his actions, saying that there will come a time when he'll have no choice but to not hesitate. The master admitted that he hasn't heard of any alchemists by the names of Sowol's new friends though, and when the boy asked for advice about them, Janjin was quick to remind him that he shouldn't trust anyone that quickly. He even teased his student about becoming too trusting because they were women. Oh, Janjin, if only you knew how Sowol made you blush earlier. Nevertheless, even if Janjin believes Sowol when he said they're good people, he reminded him that people, especially alchemists, are prone to change because of greed. Good looking out for your son, Janjin. Winter season had arrived and the ground was filled with snow. During this time, Sowol and the sisters were prepared to take on the conch spider. Sowol formulated their plan of attack and shared his anti-web potion with the rest of the group. Their plan was to have Sowol set a magical trap on the spider's home, all the while the sisters distracted it. When asked how sure the young alchemist was that his spell would work, Sowol answered with confidence. Boyan couldn't help but feel how advanced Sowol was in terms of intellect, skill, and techniques, especially about the fact that she couldn't gauge how strong Sowol actually was. It's the same feeling you get when you sit close to the genius classmate in class. And so the group trekked on. Soon enough, they reached a place where the snow was thick enough to conceal a spider's tracks. Sowol called for their added caution, especially because just a few steps ahead, the serene bamboos were there. Peaceful settings like this were too suspicious for the group. Sowol remembered from his lessons that if things were going too smoothly, it meant that he had walked into a trap. The young alchemist immediately began to scan their surroundings, and he was just quick enough to notice the giant spider from above. The beast shot a web towards the hero, but the sisters were able to slash it apart. What Ion called for Sowol to hurry and set the traps, making sure their plan went underway. Now, the sisters' only focus was to keep the spider's attention warm enough for Sowol to finish. Stood at the ready, and both sisters waited for the spider to attack. In one swift movement, the conch spider rushed forward, baring its fangs. It struck Wu Young first with its legs, but the female alchemist was able to parry the strike properly. She then called Ion from behind, where she had been getting ready to cast a spell. With a wave of her fans, a number of conjured butterflies hovered over towards the spider, distracting it greatly. However, the butterflies were not for distraction only, as when Wu Young closed her fist, the butterflies started to explode. The spider got engulfed in pink explosions as hundreds of butterflies overwhelmed the magical beast. The explosion kicked up the snow and rubble around the magical beast. With no way of figuring out if their attack had worked, the sisters braced themselves for when the dust settled. However, from out of the smoke, the spider sprung up, ready to strike again. Even in the midst of all those explosions, it seemed it didn't have the slightest effects. Looks like it would take more than a rolled-up newspaper to kill this spider. Nonetheless, the sisters didn't expect things to go easy. Both parried the rushing attack the spider had made, and Ion took the chance to attack again. She launched her Phoenix Burst Iris spell straight through the spider's eye. The spell formed an insignia made of light before exploding from the inside. This appeared to have damaged the beast, but it seemed more angry than hurt. Now, it was the conch spider's turn to attack. It gathered a ridiculous amount of frost chi at its mouth and shot this beam of freezing energy towards the sisters. But both had instinctively dodged to safety. If one would get hit, as the name suggests, that person would be flash frozen. Thankfully, out of nowhere, Sowol arrived just in time. He thanked the sisters for their efforts and declared that his trap was already set. Now it was the young alchemist's turn to face the conch spider. Sowol swiftly maneuvered towards the top of the spider's body with hover steps and drove his sword downwards to its body. If it were any other beast, it would surely have fallen. But unfortunately, the spider's armor was thick. What's more, it could turn its head backward to face its back. It charged another ball of frozen chi and shot it towards Sowol. Still having his wits about him, though, he was able to escape being frozen thanks to his agility. Seeing as how his sword was useless in a head-on approach, Sowol decided to test something. He shot some silver needles towards the serene bamboos, and sure enough, the spider moved, intercepted. The young man had theorized that the spider would do anything to protect the herbs, and so Sowol devised a plan with his group to use that as the bait. Quick on his feet and on his mind, Sowol inched closer towards the spider, with the sisters cutting off its path on either side. Unknowingly, the conch spider had stepped into the circle of flags Sowol had prepared. Without a moment to lose, he activated the void of space technique. With this, Sowol had single-handedly restricted the giant spider's movement. Now, with a proper chance to attack, the sisters dealt some powerful strikes, but like before, they weren't able to damage the beast. So, Sowol decided to take matters into his own hands and attack the beast himself. Though successful in killing it, Sowol collapsed as he apparently got bitten by the spider. Not to worry, this was all part of his plan to gauge his companion's true intentions. Contrary to what he expected, the sisters helped him instead. And so the young alchemist felt sheepish for even doubting it. Feigning unconsciousness, the sisters brought him to their home along with the serene bamboos that they wanted. Once he was laid on the bed, the sisters frantically tried to search for a cure by analyzing the dead spider's venom. Now left alone in the room, Sowol decided to do a bit of exploring of his own. He noticed the books on the table, and was surprised to learn they were advanced alchemy manuals. However, the books were obviously damaged from something, making them hard to read. Nevertheless, that was the least of his concerns as he heard one of the ladies coming back. He frantically tried to go back to bed in his original position, like how your mom catches you using your phone at night in bed and you meant to pretend to go to sleep. They're still trying to keep up the ruse. It didn't take long before Ian discovered that Sowol was awake. Awkward. Sowol couldn't just admit that he was faking his injury because he felt suspicious of the sisters that tried to help him. So he decided to play it smart. It's all Janjan's fault for making him an overthinker. He asked how Ian was able to figure out he was already awake, and it turns out she had noticed the blanket shifting ever so slightly. If Sowol was truly paralyzed from the poison, he wouldn't be able to move enough to disturb the blanket. Nonetheless, the young alchemist decided to spin a little white lie, saying that he recovered quickly because he built up an immunity against poison already. Thankfully, Ian had no reason to not believe Sowol, and so his excuse was accepted. And when Boyan walked into the room to check on Sowol, she bought his words as well. The sisters promised Sowol that he could have the spider carcass, and they even brought the serene bamboo for him. Make you feel bad about lying now, huh, Sowol? Although now is the time that Boyan had become more straightforward in asking her questions, she seemed intent on interviewing Sowol in order to make sure he'll hold up his part of the deal. Boyan first asked Sowol about his age, and both she and her sister were shocked to find out that he was just turning 24. To be honest, with all those time skips, it's hard to keep track. The two were amazed that someone so young could reach the same level as they are, wherein they both had to train for 100 years to do so. Now the question turned towards Sowol's origin since he mentioned that he was born in the forest. Boyan asked if there was someone who took care of him. Though he was more trusting of his companions now, he couldn't just carelessly reveal all of his master's identities. So Sowol told the sisters that his master had retired long ago and was already dead. In order to ensure no more questions arose from this, Saul ended his sentence with a definite message. You will not talk about it anymore. But the sisters offered their apologies of their own accord, saying that there was a reason why they were so desperate to get the damn pills. It turns out both Ian and Boyan were descended from the Umiak faction, which were alchemists from the combined clans of the Ian and Yak clans. This group focused on herbal medicine and crafting damn pills out of them. Unfortunately, the faction met its end when the Dark Forest Mountain clan raided their home quarters. Most of the survivors fled into the Forest of Beasts, but as of now, the sisters, along with all the books, herbs, and manuscripts they saved, are the only things remaining from their group. With that being said, they were glad of the new friendship they had made with Sowol, and so agreed to give access to their herbs and manuscripts back in the village. Sowol reported his experiences to Jan, now given a reason to trust the girls. The fourth master bade that it's better that way since suspicion could poison the heart. At least he admits when he's wrong. With that, the masters gathered around Sowol as he had now completed his trial to acquire the ingredients for the Eternal Dan pill. Master Hyung figured the boy would start crafting right away. Jan jokingly retorted to not give him any ideas, as the boy will most likely disappear in his rune for months. Nevertheless, Master Pang reminded the young alchemist that taking time is essential in order to create something worthwhile. Besides, Sowol wouldn't be totally alone. The boy had employed the help of his jade boar, who by this time, although not fully grown, is able to produce flames strong enough for magical forges. Yep, totally forgot the pig existed. And so Sowol set about crafting the Eternal Youth Dan pills for over a year, losing contact with his masters and the sisters. You'd expect it to be a peaceful visit. However, it was interrupted by two men, seemingly accomplices of Jan, trying to blow up the steel doors of the sisters' house. Sowol watched as an explosion rocked the earth itself.